Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Welcome back to HFO-TV. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. And today we've got Nicholas Cook, president of Sleep Sound Property Management. Thank you for coming in. We've had a lot of changes in the last couple of years in Portland and Oregon in terms of rental legislation and property owners and tenant rights and things like that. So I thought it'd be great to have somebody that's active in the property management field kind of come in and we can talk a little bit about where we are in the landscape. So maybe you can give a little background on your firm and what you guys manage, and then we'll kind of get into the nuts and bolts about what's going on in this market.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a property management company that is full service management. We're in the Portland metro area, but also in Vancouver as well.
So you do the Portland PMSA for the most part?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, and we manage, a variety of different buildings, whether they're lease ups or value add or, single family portfolios, but we have an emphasis on working with investors predominantly.
Okay. So fee management in the
Yes.
multifamily side, all through the Portland area?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so let's we all know about kind of Senate Bill 608 with the rent caps, and I think that's seemed pretty self-explanatory, depending if you're in Portland or if you're outside of Portland. If you're in Portland, it's 9.9. If you go over 10, if you're outside of Portland, it's the 7 plus CPI.
Yeah.
But the thing that it's interesting is I got more kind of people kind of shaking in their boots a little bit about this security deposit background check that City Council put through. Again, it's not going to go into effect until March. Mm-hmm. But maybe give a background from a management side. We're getting calls from investors saying, "Hey, what is there something we need to do, or how do we do that?" But maybe put some color onto that.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start. It's one of those things that they are making something that we're already doing that's a relatively complex process that's highly regulated from a fair housing standpoint.
Right.
And they're making it about 10 times more complicated. And this is for us who are doing this day in and day out. And the problem is that it's going to negatively affect not only just owners because of the fact that it's going to increase costs potentially, but it's also going to at least double or triple the time that residents have to wait to get an approval, right? Something that was going to be typically maybe a 1-2 day turnaround is now going to be probably a 5-7 day turnaround, depending on the nature of that applicant, just because of
the steps that you have to go through to approve a tenant.
Yeah, and again, it depends if you want to go with the low barrier criteria or the individualized assessment. Talking to peers in the industry, and from our perspective, the individualized assessment is really the way that we're going to go, for our firm at least, and it seems to be popular just because if you start looking at the low barrier criteria, and we're going to get into a little bit of that, so you can kind of decide, but there's some things that you should be worried about.
So maybe explain a little bit about, because I think there's been some confusion as to, there's the low barrier criteria, and then there's the individual assessment. And the low barrier is kind of the city's way of saying, we're going to set these criteria. If they meet this, they're in. And maybe give some, what is that? What do those look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically when you're doing a screening of an applicant, it's pretty standard to look at, credit history, rental history, you're looking at criminal background check, you're looking at income. Those are the big ones that you're typically looking at because you're trying to determine, does this person have the ability to pay, the willingness to pay, and are they going to take care of the asset and be a good neighbor? So those are the things that we typically look at. And what the city has done is basically taken the concept of subprime loans and applied it to
housing
tenancies. And basically saying, we're going to lower the barriers, which is called low barrier criteria. They're being candid about it.
Not trying to hide that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But nonetheless, they're basically breaking down every barrier they could think of to housing without really any understanding or care for the consequence of this. So basically with credit scores under the low barrier criteria, they're saying, well, as long as their score is at least 500, then their credit should be okay, which is terrible.
Right.
Income requirements, this is something that they're going to force regardless if you do individualized assessments, but basically you're going to be maxed out at 2.5 times or 2 times depending on the rents. And the rents are going to be based on what the median family income is, or not the median family income, it's the median family rent. So basically you're at 80% of the median family rent and below, you can charge 2.5 times the income, or require 2.5 times the income. If you're above that, then you're limited at 2 times the income. So basically you have people who are going to be spending 50% of their household income on housing, which flies in the face of every affordable standard that's ever...
Flies in the face of what the city's been talking about. That's been their biggest concern.
Absolutely.
And so that part's that doesn't matter if you're doing the individual assessment or doing the low barriers. That income cap, or however you want to say it, is going to be
Yeah, unfortunately, that's going to be citywide, and that's because it falls under their general screening requirements. So for the things for low barrier, you're looking at credit. You're looking at basically saying, if they owe less than, $1,000 in personal debts, then you can't really take that into account. If you owe a landlord less than $500, you can't take that into account. So they're really just trying to say, like, in the event this person has blemishes on their credit reports or has debts that are out in collections, then you're not going to be able to take them into account if they're smaller. One of the big ones, though, is student loans. Like, typically, management companies, landlords tend to overlook delinquencies on medical bills, but when student loans is something that many look at because it's an obligation that you have to pay. It's not like a surprise where you might get an $80,000 medical bill, right? So now they're saying that we can't look at those in that fashion as a negative inquiry on the report. And then obviously we go into some of the criminal stuff, which is where we start getting worried about safety issues, safety issues and liability issues. So some of that has to do with letting people in with misdemeanors and felonies. It depends on the amount of time that's elapsed, but they've ratcheted down those times from what have typically been much longer, waiting periods to shorter periods. So, for example, misdemeanors is basically 3 years or less. Felonies is 7 years or less.
Okay, and that's part of the low barrier criteria. You can't use that as a guideline for tenancy coming in.
Yeah.
And as a property manager, I mean, your goal is to try to keep a nice, safe environment that's beneficial for all the tenants. And part of that's been making sure you're getting good tenants coming in or new tenants in.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
So then, so you say as a, hey, we're not going to do the low barrier. That's too much risk. It's just not, what we want to do at our property. So then you go to the individual assessment.
Yes.
And then that's a whole nother. That's where you talk about the cost and the added. Right. Maybe explain a little bit about that.
So the low barrier criteria is something that has yet to be, or basically the individualized assessments. It's not totally clear on how people are going to be implementing this. From our perspective, it's probably going to take, our cost from screening from, $40 to $50 to probably a little north of $100. And that assumes we're not going to have to get an attorney involved. If we're dealing with somebody with a criminal background and we're having to do an individualized assessment, at this point, we're not comfortable doing that without legal advice. Right. And so now you're talking about maybe $200 for an application. If
this is per an application. This is not. This is an application. This is okay.
This is one person.
Right.
And so that's going to be a challenge to work through because the challenge is that leasing agents for almost every side of the business, it's an entry-level position. These are not people that have a background in social work or psychology, not parole officers. They are not going to be able to analyze this. And screening companies, they pretty much don't make the final say. So they're not going to get to this point of an individualized assessment. Now maybe you'll see this emerge, but because Portland's such a localized market, they're probably not going to add this to the cart of services that they provide. Plus, because there's going to be a lot of other risk.
And they'll end up having to take on some liability that may not be right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're looking at a significant added cost for if you go the individual assessment. Then you talked a little bit about the timing too, and the length of time it's going to take, and what's that going to do to tenants looking for a place to live. You've got added time. You've got added issues. Maybe I know it's not finalized. I mean, it's going to come in March, and they're going to do some administrative rules. I mean, so as a management company, what's kind of your wait and see? Do you start kind of advising some of your clients as to this is coming down the road, we need to look at a plan for this?
Well, we're definitely advising our clients on this because it's something they need to be aware of because people are going to wonder, why is it taking longer to fill my property? They're going to wonder what happened to that applicant. So we have to educate them on the environment that their buildings are going to be operating in and some of the challenges and how that's going to increase some of the holding expenses. This is really kind of a double-edged sword though too, because on one hand you're getting people in potentially that are going to be higher risk, and then now we also don't have the tool, which was end of tenancy notices or no cause notices as they were commonly referred to help exit somebody in the event they're not working out. So now we're kind of trapped with this person. We have to wait till they commit 3 violations.
Within a 12-month, yes.
Yeah, so it's going to be challenging, but we are advising our clients because again, it depends on what your goals are. I mean, there's regulatory stuff is a bit of a nightmare, but at the same time, if you're a long-term holder, this is going to be a giant barrier of entry to a lot of other people. It's going to basically reduce competition, and so if you are holding long-term in Portland, while these things may be somewhat painful, especially initially, they could be protecting you from competition.
Right, and that's we've kind of talked about that. When you look at what the city and the regions try to talk about with affordable housing, all the regulations you're putting in are, again, if you're an existing owner, I mean, you put up more barriers of entry, you're going to have less supply coming in, which again kind of defeats the whole purpose of trying to make it more affordable. But that's probably for another discussion. So that's And then so in terms of doing the individual assessment. So once that stuff comes, the administrative rules come in October, then it's going to be kind of a gearing up. I'm sure the rental agreements are going to have to change.
Yeah.
All this, the process is going to have to change. It'll be kind of a wait and see how we roll that out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things operationally that aren't clear. I mean, some of the things that they reference is that if a resident is meeting these criteria, that you must enter into a rental agreement. A common practice, though, is to enter into execution agreements before you enter into rental agreements.
Okay.
So it's not really quite clear what's going to happen there. They've also changed some things about timelines for documentation. So, for example, now we're doing all of our documentation before a tenant moves in, basically so that we can set up the baseline condition.
Right.
And the way that it reads, it's basically saying that the tenant has time to do this, and then if the tenant doesn't do it, then you get to do it within, basically 10 days, from the first week that they move in. Which means, are we having to document the property after they've moved in?
Yeah, which kind of, again, that's not the idea on that. So interesting. And then the other thing too in this is security deposits.
Yes.
I mean, as you talked about, when you've got individual assessments, having some latitude. Okay, maybe like you said, maybe it's a medical. Maybe it's an increased security deposit to offset some of the risk. But now that's going to be more heavily regulated.
Yeah.
Which from our standpoint, you kind of look at it. The people that you're trying to help and find housing are going to make it more difficult because. As the risk side gets greater, people are going to pull back and just not.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, and does the security deposit, that come March too?
Yeah, so this is all coming down the pipeline at the same time, and so we're really hoping we get some good guidance on this, from the city at least, because they're not known for that.
Right.
And we can gear up and move forward, but it is definitely going to impact financials pretty significantly. It's one of those kind of hidden expenses, which is security deposit disposition and retention. So
right.
Those are one of those things a lot of people don't pay attention to, but have a real effect.
And then from the management side, I mean, your administrative costs are going to go up if you're doing an individual assessment on every tenant. I mean, and that's going to get past this,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And then talking about costs and all that, we just saw last week, I think it was, City of Portland came out with a proposed fee, annual fee of $60 a unit.
Yeah, somewhat arbitrarily, but
just kind of threw that up. So that's another thing that's going to be coming down I think that's going to go in place in January as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's from what we hear is going to be the case. I mean, they've been, trying to get something like this for quite some time, and, we'll see how things go in terms of what they actually end up implementing. Hopefully, they give some more clarity about what those funds are being used for, but it's not clear. Gotcha.
And then I'm curious, from a management side, when you look at, going back to like credit stores and things like that, I mean, I've heard somebody say, previous actions don't predict, future actions. And I was having a conversation with somebody, said, would you sell somebody a car and take a personal check from this person if they got a 500 credit score and they owe a bunch of money, but then you're asking somebody to move them into a unit. You're not giving the management company or even the owner the ability to, maybe personalize it, maybe it's a security deposit or something to protect them. I mean, is that kind of the same take you guys are taking, like your hands are going to be tied a little bit?
Well, our hands are definitely going to be tied a little bit. I mean, There's no doubt about that. We're going to do the best we can to represent our clients, which is why we're leaning towards the individualized assessment.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, it may be more work up front, but it's going to be protecting the asset from having residents that are going to be likely to default. And to some degree, it's protecting the residents from themselves, because if they're qualifying for something that they shouldn't qualify for, right. That's not going to work well for them long term and could create some more significant impacts in their life down the line.
Right, now you don't have the ability to kind of help them kind of through that process. It's so cut and dry. So what other big, I mean, you've been in this market for a while. I mean, we all know about this, but maybe you can shine some light on some of your experiences that you've seen as, I want to say the tenor has kind of changed between property owner and tenant relationship. Are you kind of feeling that as over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's from an operational side and how we're dealing with our residents, what we hear from our residents, we haven't seen a ton of tension necessarily with the tenants directly ratchet up. But what we found is that the political environment has changed.
Right.
And so what you hear on the news, what you hear from officials, from the city, from the legislature, they are saying things that are actually damaging to the relationship, and they're demonizing landlords. They're basically using landlords as a scapegoat for the fact that there's a lack of affordable housing, a lack of construction, and we're just an easy target. Fortunately, a lot of that hasn't carried over, at least verbally, to the tenant bases that we work with where it's coming up in our relationships. But I will tell you that the demographics of who are renting is changing, and everyone has access to Google and can look up Chapter 90, which is landlord tenant law. And so we are having to field a lot of those questions because it's so easy for people to look stuff up. And oftentimes their interpretation isn't totally accurate.
So it's more of an educational process of kind of what, okay.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing I think the medical field's had to go through is, everybody gets on and does a self-diagnosis and they go talk to the doctor and they've got to explain, don't believe everything you read. So I think we've got a little bit of that with the tenants nowadays. The interesting thing will be, as we talked about with the city of Portland doing some of the regulations, how's that, long-term going to affect the supply of housing? Are you going to look at, more risk involved, you'll see less housing, which again, inevitably, with the people we've talked to, we still have immigration coming here, so you still have the demand, but if we have less supply, are we just exacerbating the problem of affordability?
Well, I think it's definitely going to get worse. And I mean, the sad thing is that the variety of properties and housing options that tenants are going to have to choose from is going to be limited because you're going to have a lot of small operators exit because of the risk, because of the administrative cost, and then you're basically going to have some consolidation of ownership. And it'll be much more difficult. I mean, if you want to rent an apartment, we'll probably have plenty of those available at some point in time over time. But with single-family homes, when those leave the market, they never come back.
Right.
So that's the sad part, which is like, if you want to live in a house, like you better make a ton of money, otherwise you're not going to be able to do it.
Which again trickles down. I mean, because the group that was going to rent a house is now looking for that larger apartment. They take those, and that and it just goes all the way down. And which is kind of, we try to explain this to somebody about the new construction. Yes, new construction, they're building higher quality. We would say Class A, but that's typically the way it works. And they're going to build there because of rents. But that just filters all the way down to the group that could go in a B is now in an A and vice versa. And they just what we've heard through, and again we don't do single family, is that you're seeing a lot of single family homes that were rentals. Those owners are saying with what's coming down from the city, maybe we don't want to be in this business, and it's going to be like you said, for sale product that'll probably never come back in the rental pool.
Yeah, but I would say even smaller operators, if they're under 25 units in multifamily, I mean this could be a burden for them. There's a lot of people who self-manage out there at that size. And I mean, just again, the regulatory compliance between SB 608, City of Portland, relocation, I mean, all this stuff within, basically an 18-month period, it's pretty mind-numbing. And we have a team, and we have a large office, and we manage a lot of property, so we do this every day. And even then, we find it to be sometimes a little overwhelming. So.
And for somebody who wants to get more information on your company, they can go to the website down below here.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine you guys are gearing up there, you're going to get a lot more inquiries about management services as people start getting educated about what is coming through.
Yeah.
One thing we've noticed which is interesting, is a lot of owners of multifamily, sometimes they, kind of hear it after the fact, and we've been trying to, kind of why we have you here today, is kind of promote and say, look, there are things going on, legislative-wise, market-wise, you need to get educated on this because, again, it's going to affect you. I mean, if you wait till too long, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, thanks for coming and sharing this, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. And that's it for HFO-TV, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right.
That's great, man.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.